Welcome to Protea Conversations, the podcast where leadership in business and accounting isn't just discussed, it's explored. I'm your host, Zane Stevens, and thank you for joining me as we delve into the minds of some of the most influential leaders in the industry. Our journey is one of discovery, from unraveling the unique stories that shaped our guest careers to invaluable advice that fueled their success. We're here to provide you with simple, actionable advice to accelerate your career and personal growth. Whether you're a budding professional or a seasoned executive, these conversations are designed to offer insight and perspectives that resonate with everyone. So tune in, engage, and be inspired as we build better leaders together. Welcome to Protea Conversations.
Today I'm thrilled to welcome Joe Manganelli to the conversation. Joe is a partner and chief revenue officer of Amalgam, a cutting-edge data aggregation and automation platform purpose-built for the accounting industry. In his role, he leads sales, marketing, and customer experience, working closely with accounting firms, finance teams, and consultancies to streamline their operations and embrace automation. Before co-founding Amalgam, Joe launched and scaled Calculate, an outsourced finance and accounting firm that grew rapidly to serve emerging businesses and was ultimately acquired. His career started on Wall Street with roles at Goldman Sachs and Perella Weinberg Partners in corporate finance before pivoting into entrepreneurship and technology. Joe holds an engineering degree from Lehigh University and brings a powerful blend of technical insight, financial acumen, and operational experience to the work he does today. He's also a strong advocate for pragmatic automation, championing tools that reduce manual work while keeping workflows accessible and human-friendly. We're going to dive into Joe's journey from building Calculate to launching Amalgam, as well as perspective on scaling firms, the evolving tech stack for accountants, and how AI and automation are shaping the future of finance. Joe, welcome to Protea Conversations.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here, Zane. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's always good to see you, and I had the pleasure of hanging out a little bit in person just a few weeks ago, which was is always a nice experience. So, we know everybody online and you get to know their personalities, but nothing better than, reaching out and spending some in-time time together.
Yeah. The rare hot day in San Francisco. I think it hit like 70 degrees that day.
Absolutely beautiful, up on a rooftop. Really couldn't complain.
Yeah, not at all.
Generally a good trip to the Bay Area?
Yeah, no, it was excellent. Somehow it was my first trip out, but it was super productive from a work side and super fun from a personal side.
And that was just the back end of a fairly long trip in general, right?
Yeah, I had hit a conference in Denver, which was great. And then I popped over to San Francisco, got a couple baseball games in over the trip. And then, I think we made a minute on a Thursday and I headed back over the weekend.
Yeah. So, I do want to hear about your journey, but seeing that we're touching on the conference right now, and you and I spoke a little bit about these smaller sort of micro conferences and the value they have, especially from a technology partner like yourself. Tell us a little bit about your experience and sort of your perspective on attending these conferences.
Yeah, I think the conferences can be really good. I think it depends on your approach and what you're doing too. My sort of bias is what you've outlined a little bit in my background is a lot about like in the accounting space, and we're selling automation and things to that nature. And I think about it's like, okay, well, what am I trying to do? If we're sort of lighthearted about it, I'm asking process-driven people to change their process, right? So that's a tall ask to begin with. I think the other thing working in like services and accounting is the people I'm selling to generally are selling their own services as well. And how do they do that? It's usually driven with relationships. It's usually driven with personal connections. And that's something they're used to. So I think for me, my philosophy with Amalgam has been to really drive the selling through relationships and that sort of thing. And I think it's been pretty effective. And conferences, especially some of the smaller ones, can be really effective for that approach.
Yeah, I can sort of see the benefit. When I go to some of these bigger conferences, it's just this massive hall. There's thousands of people walking around, and trying to get time with any sort of vendor there is hard. That, I'm sure most of them have been fairly junior level people. They've probably been given like a stopwatch, spend 2 minutes with a person, get the email, get them on a call. But I'm assuming with a smaller conference, there's just a little bit more time to connect.
Yeah, for sure. So at the conference that I went to in Denver this July is Bridging the Gap. And it's, maybe there were 250 or 300 attendees. I think it's, both sides. On one is the people who were there were generally the founders or drivers of their businesses in general. And also, over a few day period, I'm able to see someone multiple times, which is really great. I went to another conference earlier this year, which was about 1,500 people attended, an effective conference as well. But I, had to carve out 15 minutes to see this one person. It wasn't, versus the one in July here with about 300 people. It was one where I was able to see the same person a couple times, follow up, those types of things. And I think the connections you're making there are a lot more effective. And then, obviously bonus points if you're able to see them kind of at the bar afterwards or passing through in sort of a more informal setting.
Yeah, it makes a lot more sense just when you get that chance to get in front of them. And, the smaller conferences, they tend to be smaller venues as well, and not these massive venues on the strip
Yeah.
of Vegas where, like, who knows where the people are heading to after a session.
You have to go to your room to take a call, and it's a 20-minute walk each way, right? Like that kind of stuff can add up. But I think, and back to the earlier point about like the kind of building relationships, or just like the basis of whether you're selling a service or you're selling a product to service people like I'm talking about. Trust is the cornerstone of that, right? And I'm not going to I'm going to get on an immediate pitch call if I'm trying to sell a software. And it's like, okay, I need to explain to you what this is. I need to explain to you whatever you're doing today is wrong. I'm going to explain to you that I'm better and that you should pay me for it. Like that's not something that's going to happen in a 20-minute conversation. So to be able to meet people in person and build trust, and, building a business in its early days is a lot about awareness. So, having those one-on-one conversations and having those relationships, connections, are a really effective way to just really build awareness, even if they're not going to become a customer directly.
Makes sense. So Joe, tell me, why accounting? I mean, you're an engineer, right? So how did you end up in this big world of accounting?
Yeah. So you hit it. I went to engineering school and then found my way to Goldman Sachs. But really within Goldman Sachs, I had been placed in sort of an FP&A, a little bit of an accounting role, and really started working into that space. And so over a period of years, I got relatively good at that. But I liked it. I didn't love it. I had this kind of monkey on my back, though, that I wanted to start my own business. I had a couple ideas that I say were maybe not good enough to really turn into something. And then I was talking with some friends, ex-colleagues who had early stage companies, and they wanted to bring me on kind of as their CFO, COO sort of roles. I realized they just didn't have the cash or workflow to warrant it. But if I could do that person one day a week and then that company one day a week, like that, I had something here. And that's sort of how Calculate came to be. We're really able to just look, I had built these skill sets. They were useful to people. Why don't I try to sell it directly to them? And so, in April of 2017, launched Calculate full time with just that, acting as the sort of CFO accountant for early stage emerging businesses that wanted kind of higher quality and more hands-on service.
That makes sense. Before we get into Calculate, tell us about your time at Goldman Sachs and what does that mean to be in the FP&A role? And I've worked for investing company, and FP&A meant lots of building out models that basically all look the same and just slight tweaks here and there. Similar sort of experience, or a little bit more deep dive into real numbers?
Yeah, this is good question. I think the experience of the actual work was probably not too dissimilar. A lot of the monthly cadence that comes with it, the monthly close, the reporting, then the budgeting season, gathering the data, but all of that kind of stuff is there. But I think also Goldman's an interesting place culturally, I think, and those can be pros and cons, or they can kind of be objective. But I think Goldman's a rigorous place to work, not just in the number of hours, but sort of intellectually rigorous, where there's a lot of smart people. There's also a lot of people who just feel the need to kind of prove who they are to other people. So, even as a junior employee, if you're in a setting where you're presenting, there might be someone in that group that just like feels the need to kind of pick holes in everything, right? And so like you get embarrassed in one of those calls one time in the first year of working there, it's something that sticks with you. So I sort of developed a little bit of a knack there, which is really good training. Is like every meeting I was going into, I sort of dry ran that meeting 2 or 3 times in my head and sort of thought about the questions I might be asked or those types of things. So when I showed up to that meeting, even if that question seemed to come out of nowhere, I sort of seemed already prepared or something like that. And I think while the work, to your point, was probably pretty similar, the setting at Goldman was one that was sort of interesting, even if a part of the culture I didn't love. It was also something that helped me develop an interesting skill.
You'd say it's a good experience.
Yeah, good experience.
At the end of the day, like when you balance it all together, there's the good, the bad, but overall, it's pretty good feeling about it.
Yeah, no, I think I generally think of myself as someone who's pretty grateful for things. Like I'm grateful for that experience. Is it something I want to do again? No, but I'm glad to have had it, and the things I use today or who I am today is in part impacted from that.
Yeah, and I asked that question specifically because, in the accounting world, and especially on social media, there's a lot of this push like, hate the big four, can't go there, you're not going to learn anything. But it sort of reminds me a lot of my experience at KPMG, where it was rigorous, right? I walked into a room, all these people were really smart. You didn't get there by accident. You had to work hard to get in there. You'd get questions that you probably wouldn't get in a normal setting because people are just seeing things very differently. And there was a lot of rigor. You had to be prepared. You had to set yourself apart. You had to figure out like where where you fit in the whole big picture of things, and where you can push and where you couldn't push. And as much as like I work tons of hours as well, but
Yeah.
on the balance, I walk away and I went, that's a great experience. It taught me to think in so many different lines that I never thought. I thought accounting was just one straight line, but actually it's this crisscross of ideas and departments all coming together. And the rigor and the smart people I was constantly with, I feel like really elevated me in the 4 years that I was there to sort of set me apart when I went to my next role.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think it also, you have to ask yourself a question, like, do you just want a job? Do you just want a place that's easy to be around? Or do you want to push yourself, right? And like your choice to go there and stay there too. Like every day is a choice to stay. I think is something that is like really important. Like who do you want to be? What kind of career do you want to be? And it's something kind of translated and calculated a little bit, I think, in two ways. Is one is I didn't hire anyone straight out of college. We always hired folks who were a few years out, and a lot of times from the big four. And my philosophy was like, calculates a rigorous place to work. I'm not here to teach rigor. So if I knew you went through 3 busy seasons at PwC, that was something that I thought you should be able to perform, and that's a good foundation coming into Calculate. So, and then kind of to that end, if you go that harder route, it really opens up other opportunities. Because then when I was kind of at Calculate trying to sell myself and going into a meeting nervously of trying to impress someone, we weren't talking about my credentials very quickly, very long. Basically, I got on the call or got on a meeting and I said, hey, I'm Joe. I used to work at Goldman Sachs and I think I should do your numbers, right? Like people aren't asking me if I'm double checking my work after that, right? It's sort of, we're moving the conversations where we want to focus it, which is around the actual elements of their business or whatever it may be.
And just to sort of put the disclaimer in here, and we're not saying that smaller firms and medium-sized firms are a bad place. There is just a different experience. And this is probably a little bit more of the defense to, the big firms who keep getting bashed. There is a lot to learn with them, even if some people say it's very, very small part of the business. It's, with everything in life, it's what opportunities you take and how hard you push and how willing you are to learn, it will help you. Yeah. Clearly, Joe, it set you up for success and gave you a sense of what you're looking for and Calculate, which when you started it, probably, was just this dream, but it ended up being this very, very successful outsourced accounting business. We took some time to discuss sort of the growth, and it's pretty incredible the numbers you were able to do. So, share with us a little bit, like what did that look like? Started in 2017 and just blew up from there, basically?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. So started in 2017. I just started myself, quit my job at the time with really no clients or prospects. I was working in banking, though I was doing kind of a corporate finance role. It was still a lot of hours. So there was no like moonlighting opportunity really. Yep. And yeah, I just started going out and talking to people and telling them what I did. And trying to convince them that they should give me a shot to do their books. And once you kind of get going with that, it starts to roll a little bit. I mean, obviously a lot of time spent talking to those people and getting those initial clients, but the formula of just going in there, doing a great job and making people feel it, I think is just so important, right? So you're going to obviously keep those clients, but they're also going to tell their friends and former colleagues about you, which is going to open up opportunities for further growth. And so that was like kind of the early days. My thought when I quit my job is if this fails, I'll give myself 6 months. If it fails, then I can just go get another corporate job sort of thing. And that sort of gave me the comfort to go and give it a try. And it went the opposite. Within 6 months, I had my first employee. We were offering tax services and doing all kinds of different things and sort of the full stack and really sort of run it from there. So my motto is kind of like this brick by brick mentality. You build a brick build a house one brick at a time, and kind of getting those incremental gains over time really materialize. And I think that's what it was. There was no sort of breakthrough moment or one big deal that put us over the head. It was, hey, here's a $2,000 a month deal. Great, let's take it. Here's a $500 a month one early days. Like, let's take it. And those types of things add up over time. And again, just being disciplined about like the quality of the work, the quality of the people, and quality of the clients.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you think it's the accounting world that is sort of privileged in the way that they can go start a business if it fails? Don't worry, we'll just get another job, and like nobody will really see it as a failure. Like I don't think anybody who's like tried to start their own firm and it didn't work out is like labeled a failure. They're just labeled, you took a chance, good luck. Yeah. Like now come and use those skills.
You're almost revered.
You've learned. Yeah. It's like, oh, you took the chance, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Because then you work like whatever. Let's say I went to go work for some big bank or something. I probably would have been the guy in the office who's like, oh, that's Joe. He does this, but he also used to have his own company, right? Like it's kind of that thing. And I think, I think there's an element, I think a lot about this from a sales cycle too, in the sense that like I'm selling to people who have a risk aversion generally, or in Calculate, I'm managing people that have that. And it's two sides. I think one is just the work lends itself, like the balance sheet has to balance. We like things that fit in certain places. But it's also, I think, what we're sold in sort of our lives as kids, and then also into college. And then once you leave university, going and get a job where there's like very much a defined career path as an accountant. And that in itself is a less risky sort of trajectory. So it certainly attracts certain mindsets, both in the type of work that's being done, but then also, oh, you'll never be out of work if you're an accountant, right? You'll always have an opportunity. Or you go and you get that junior job at KPMG. Like there's a very clear outline of like, okay, if you do this right for the next 20 years, you'll be a partner. And I think that lends itself. And so certainly like, that also to the point of you kind of can become revered in a place if like you go and you work in a corporate finance or accounting team, having had a business, you're a novelty, so to speak.
Yeah, I can't imagine if you went and started an engineering firm and it failed, they'd be like, oh my gosh, he's got to be a terrible engineer, right?
Yeah.
And you do an accounting, like you failed, they're like, oh, he's probably still an exceptional accountant, he just couldn't run a business.
Right. And also like, I talk to a lot of accountants and, junior days in accounting, you probably felt this way too. You're just sort of like in awe of the senior people and how much knowledge they have. And your biggest focus is about gaining technical knowledge, whether better for worse. That's what a lot of junior accountants do. And I think over time, you realize that like, that's great. But the people who really differentiate themselves are the people who are be able to do sales and manage teams and that kind of stuff. And I think we sort of, whether it's true or not, we just assume that if someone failed their business, they didn't fail because they had bad accounting skills. They failed because maybe they weren't able to do the sales or whatever that part of it would have been. But we don't assume it's poor accounting skills.
So how long did you run Calculate for?
So started in 2017, ran it through the kind of end Q4 of 2023. So it's 6.5 years or so. Yeah. And we were like very much, I focused kind of on top line growth. I paid myself modestly, had a pretty good kind of recruiting funnel and had a pretty good funnel for acquiring new business and was able to grow pretty substantially. I think you kind of highlighted a little bit. I think our like slowest growth year, like a full year basis, was like 76% or something like that on a top line basis. So yeah, if I look that back, perhaps that was too aggressive for a services firm, but we certainly like had a good trajectory. And I'm not saying that because I'm like patting myself on the back or I have skills that other people don't. Like there were a lot of tailwinds in this space then, as there are now, but particularly then that helped it along. Like there were times where I was just saying no to deals like left and right because we just couldn't have the staff, or I didn't want to take on another deal and risk the existing clients that we had in terms of our attention to them and things of that nature. So it was a pretty rapid rise for an accounting type firm. And we did it kind of all with cash flow. We didn't take on outside funding. It was just, a good group of people focused on doing good work.
You must have been doing something special though, because those are incredible growth numbers, and our biggest growth years, it always felt like, I was struggling to keep my head above water, especially on the hiring cycle, trying to bring that next person in, get them trained, get them up to speed. You said you had a great funnel for the recruiting, but how did you manage that portion of it? Because that's the toughest part, I think, about running an accounting firm, is bringing new people, getting them up to speed, learning your culture, your values, the way you do things. And when you're growing so quickly, that just increases the pressure on getting it right.
Yeah. So I think we had a couple things we did that were maybe atypical, and a couple things were just like elbow grease hard work. So I'd say on the front end, we had developed a brand and Calculate, and sort of the way we spoke to our audience was sort of really geared towards the big four accountant who maybe spent 2 to 10 years there and wanted to try something else and wanted to be an entrepreneurial. So we had very much of a like brand, I would say, in the recruiting space, where it was easy for, let's say, that senior associate from PwC or Grant Thornton to find us and be able to kind of get in the funnel. And then in terms of a process, we had what we thought was a pretty objective process. It was predictable. So when we get someone or we're recruiting, we had interview process and kind of went through. And then on the like actual integration side, I think part of it is like, I probably could have done a better job maybe of building processes into the business, but you can make up a lot for processes when you just have kind of dynamic people. So if I'm hiring someone who's a senior associate at Grant Thornton and their manager was a manager or senior manager at PwC, like that person's pretty dynamic. They know what good looks like. And so having that kind of structure or infrastructure, I'd say, was good. And then we also had a pretty robust onboarding plan. We basically had over the first 30 days, we had, I think, like 16 or 20 different like sessions where you would be trained, both cultural and technical. And they would also be given by different people on the team. So over your first 30 days, you met your whatever team of 5 people, but you also probably met another 12 to 15 people who weren't on your team. And so you were able to like make connections with people across the company. And like the sales tax one was given by kind of our in-house sales tax expert. So I knew she was always the person I could go to for sales tax questions. So I think that was really effective. And then obviously like 60, 90, so on, check-ins and regular reviews and stuff like that. But some of that stuff is just old fashioned, like elbow grease of like putting in some trainings, making sure they're getting integrated with the team and having a tight feedback loop.
So you sell it sort of like as that next step, like, hey, I want to get out of public practice. So this is your next step before maybe you take on that big role of a controller or anything better at a private company?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it was like, hey, let's say just to use that senior associate, you're a senior associate at a large accounting firm. You've done audit for 3 years, 5 years, whatever. You clearly have accounting skills. Maybe you like accounting, but you probably don't like the application of that within what you're doing. Come to Calculate, you get to use your skill set that you have a foundation in. You can be around other smart, capable peoples, but you can also apply that in a new way. You'd be working with startups. You'd be talking directly with the COO or the founder of that company and feeling a little bit more entrepreneurial, feeling a little bit more you're actually impacting a business versus walking through that cash rec or looking at the AP account within a balance sheet in the month of April every year as you're kind of marching towards an audit sort of thing. So that was effective. Was it explicit? Like we didn't advertise that, but those were things that we talked about on interviews and things of that nature.
It's interesting because a lot of the times, everybody talks about like niching for clients and understanding who they are and what you want to do. And it seems like a big part of your strategy was almost niching around the people that you were hiring and being very clear on like, this is the small defined area of people that we're going to hire because we understand, it's a very dynamic environment, high pressure, things are moving quickly. So we need people that came from dynamic, high pressure, fast moving companies. So we're going to only hire those people. We're going to effectively niche on our hires and make sure like with some good practices that we have the right people that are ready to sort of, jump on the treadmill that's running, 20 miles an hour day one.
And like it too, right? Like there are certain people and, matter of fact, it's like and we lost some employees to this too. There are jobs that are easier that will pay you more doing similar work. But I think there are people who, and those were some of the best that I love to work with, who just preferred like being in services, having clients. And so, I'll take a few $1,000s less a year or whatever the number is to be able to have a more dynamic work environment and be exposed because you work on 5-7 clients or something like that at any given time. You're going to expose yourself and learn a lot more about business and life and that than VC and all that kind of stuff by being in that more client service role.
Yeah. So I think, people who are looking for jobs, sometimes they'll be like, oh, it's just an accounting firm. I'm just going to be doing accounting. But I think that crux right there where you're working with multiple clients, seeing different businesses, seeing different types of managers and owners that you're working with, you're turbocharging your growth curve, right? You're having to learn so much quicker. And I think one of those things that people got to get out of their mind, like it might not be the best idea just to go to a corporate world, especially if you've come from public practice where maybe you were a little isolated, maybe you didn't get the experience you're looking for. A really good place to sort of, speed up the growth and then go find that big corporate cushy job that, will take you into your retirement. But this is a great place to get that learning and development early.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's basically the sales pitch we'd give them too.
You decided to sell. Tell us about that.
Yeah. I think that I really loved building the business. I didn't love operating the business. And I think when we came into like the 35, 40, 45 headcount range, it was more about like operating the business and that type of stuff. And early days, I loved kind of just like getting in the weeds and sort of working through it. And I think a turning point for me was, I forget exactly how many employees were, maybe 30, 35. And I used to meet every employee on their first day. I was usually the first real call in an interview process. So we do a screening and then I was the second interview or first full interview. And then I'd always meet every employee for at least 30 minutes on the first day. And I remember one of those around like hire number 30 and they said, wow, this is really great. I get to meet the CEO on the first day. And so two things that told me. One is that they see me as someone who's kind of arm's length. It's like they're calling me by a title. The second thing is
Yeah.
I didn't really ever call myself the CEO. I kind of like refer to that now because I think it makes sense. But like at the time, I just said, I'm the founder. Like we're just working, we're building something here. And I think I really loved the build and sometimes the existential crises that come with it. I remember a time we had $9,000 in our bank account and we had in a few days payroll would come out for 13K, right? Like I actually that's stressful, but I look fondly a little bit, or I have nostalgia for those moments. And so when you're running a company of 35, 40, it's different. Like you're not in the trenches with people. They kind of are treating it a little bit more like a job. And I wasn't having as much fun anymore. So I kind of ran a process to kind of see what was next and ultimately landed with selling the business. Not necessarily that I wanted to be out of the business. I very much enjoyed it as a whole, but kind of being the guy running it as an operator was by myself was something that I was a little bit less interested in kind of continuing on doing.
Yeah, I can feel you. Like, we're 40 people and there was a lot of, dynamic movement and having to rethink and change all the time to get there. And now when we're at it, there's still a lot of things happening and I'm having to constantly rethink things, but it's to maintain. And it is just different because it's like, how do we keep our success rather than how do we keep going up? And it is it's more boring, right? It just is. It's, it's the things that you're talking about are very much mundane versus when you're trying to grow that it's super dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've got 3 paths to go in front of me. Which way do I go versus, do I prune tree A or tree tree B today? It's sort of like old man in his garden versus like the adventure in the back country.
Yeah. I think it was like I was watching an interview with Jerry Seinfeld or something, and they're talking about how he writes jokes and how like torture it is for him to write jokes. And he's like, but he sort of elaborated and said, if any successful person or successful thing that you do involves torture, but like, is it the torture that you enjoy? And this could be a bodybuilder at the gym loves the torture of being there, or him writing jokes, or us, right? Like for me, the pruning of the trees, that torture was just not a torture I enjoyed. The other torture, which is like, whatever the gardening analogy is for like turning over soil or something to plant a bunch of new seeds that you've never seen before. That is torture that I enjoy. And I think that's what it comes down to. And I think like for you, even for what you're doing, right? Is this torture that you enjoy and you're going to continue to enjoy for the next stretch, or is it telling you something else?
For any of my team listening, it is torture I enjoy, and I will be doing it for a long time still. But yeah, it's I totally get that. So you went through a sale. Tell us about that. How does that process look? How does it feel? Are you happier with the outcome?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it was right. It was the right move. I think it was interesting because I didn't like hire an investment banker or anything like that. I was able to go through a process. I think I reached out to about 30 different firms, whether they be strategic or financial buyers. I got about 20 conversations and I think like 8 official offers came in. So it was like a good full process, and sort of proud of being able to run that by myself. And then, yeah, it can be arduous. I think it's something that certainly takes up a lot of real estate mentally and not something you should consider doing passively. I think if you're out there and you're considering doing an M&A transaction, either buy side or sell side, you need to expect to devote your full attention to it because I think it deserves it. I mean, there's a lot of little pieces, whether it be negotiating the contracts or diligence or things to that nature that I think are super important. And I would say even people are, oh, diligence this, diligence that. I mean, we had clean books, obviously. Like our business was a strong business. The diligence part to me wasn't as much as like more of the mental real estate of going through the process and negotiating and that sort of thing. So that's really what took up a lot of energy, is that. And then versus, the actual like going line by line through a diligence call or something like that. And maybe it's from the accounting background, but that just didn't faze me as much. Like I did a little bit of research, but I had done the books. I knew everything that was in there. Like just get on the call and talk to the accounting firm who's diligencing us and kind of get through it.
I mean, I think it helps that you had a successful business that had upward trajectory, that was working well. I mean, that always makes it a little bit easier, right? When you get into business and it's a little flimsy and maybe the numbers don't make 100% sense, it's, the pressure amounts when they start asking questions and you know that your answer is probably not good enough.
Yeah. And I think, Some of it too is like anyone's going to find problems with your business. I'll find problems with my business. I think part of it too is like having the mindset of, and which helps me through the process too, is like I was always ready to continue to run the business. And like, we might have held off on some plans, or we might have like had done a couple different things while the process was going on. But like if the deal that we got close to and ultimately closed fell apart, like I was ready to continue my role for however long and continue to do it. I mean, I think like having that mindset's really important, because you never want to be in a position where you have to take a deal, whether you physically have to take it or you're mentally kind of there and you're not sort of pushing the way you should be pushing. So that was always like my alternative, was that I have a really great business. And that's just I think a really positive place to be in mentally.
Yeah, I think that is really great advice for anybody who's running a business. Sell before you have to. And that have to is either your financial trouble or you just can't anymore. You've had enough, because you're in a buyer will sense that you have to sell.
Yeah.
And you're just not going to get the best deal. And it most likely situation, you'll walk away being pretty unhappy with the outcome, whatever that outcome is.
And sometimes it's not financial. Like I didn't spend a lot of time negotiating the financial elements of the deal, but I spent a lot of time negotiating other things on behalf of my team or whatever those types of things were. So I think that's and it's an important element. And if you feel like you have to sell, then convince yourself that you like it for a while as you go through the deal. And then, once you get through, you can let your guard down.
That's great advice. Joe, you started a business, you ran the business, you sold the business. What would your biggest lesson for that process be for other accountants maybe considering starting their own accounting firm?
I'd say just give it time. I kind of mentioned my little motto, brick by brick, but I think a lot of things just take time to develop. And sometimes they just require you to continue the incremental improvements. Like very seldomly does something just like develop, or even if it looks that way from the outside, like that's not always the case. It's like, oh, I can sit here and brag about 76% was our worst growth year. Like, I'm a divorced man. Working on my business was an impact of my divorce. Like I was working a lot on weekends and prioritizing that kind of stuff. So like those things happen too. And I think it's important, but giving it time and persistence, I think is ultimately like the best advice I can give anyone who's trying to build a business or grow something over time.
Yeah, great advice. So now Amalgam, tell us a little bit about this new venture. And I say new in the loosest terms, because I know it's been around for a while and it's got a good customer base, but it's, your full-time devotion, it's fairly new. So tell us about Amalgam. What does it do? Why should we be using it?
Yeah, for sure. No, thanks for highlighting that. For us, just a quick background is we built it within Calculate. So we recognize within Calculate, there's a lot of inefficiency of just like logging into a system, downloading a CSV. What do I do with that data? How do I get that into my general ledger? So we started writing some scripts with my current partner, Ben, back in 2020, let's say, and that sort of developed and it became a tool that was really effective for us. We were reducing the time it took to close the books and do different tasks. And we realized it was a good tool, but other people wanted it too. So before selling Calculate, maybe late 22, I think it was, we spun out Amalgam as its own company. Ben left to run that and sort of continued to build that. I was running Calculate in the sale process we just talked about. And over that time, Amalgam was a great product. Like the largest customer grew to 300 users. There were other customers, things to that nature. So it had its good core. But then after I left Calculate, kind of looking for what was next, I realized that would be a really great professional challenge. And also, while it was a good product at its core, it lacked kind of like the front of house leadership. So no one was doing sales, marketing, kind of customer support. So I lead that function now. And then, it's an awesome product. I think just very briefly thinking about it as getting data from your disparate systems and using Excel or Google Sheets as the interface. So let's say my client is selling things through Shopify, download that data with a click. I can manipulate it if I need it, but then also send multiple journal entries into QuickBooks or Sage Intacct or NetSuite, whatever I'm using on the other sides. You can think about that and other processes where it definitely reduces the amount of manual effort going into it.
So it's effectively a tool that helps you gather data, get into your accounting system where a tool doesn't already exist.
Yeah.
A lot of these have these built-in integrations, but they don't want to, they want to pay Intuit the fee to be able to integrate. So you need something, and Amalgam would sort of be that bridge.
Yeah. Or just that integration isn't good for you. Let's say like we built it kind of like Shopify, I use an example, like Shopify and QuickBooks, like Shopify will create like thousands of SKUs potentially, all with new inventory amounts, and really like blow up your QuickBooks account. You don't necessarily want that. I just want a journal entry with a schedule that's saved on my drive. Great. Amalgam's great for that. You can also do it a lot with downloading information out of the GLs, whether that be just like putting together reporting packages and things of that nature. It's great for that, but also editing data in bulks. If you're getting a new client or just you're in a new business and you need to rebuild the books or convert from cash to accrual, we're usually finding those kind of big data transformations. It probably reduces that time in about half. So a lot of scale being able to get through those projects, which can be disruptive. You know the saying, right? You can get a new client if they have messy books, like you're pulling people off of other projects or kind of reallocating resources to get that done. It can be disruptive. Reducing that in half can really help smooth those bumps.
Yeah, and especially in this new world that we've all entered, where accountants have been told, fixed fee, anything where we can, automate, make our time a little bit more efficient, have those time for the conversations, actually looking at the data makes a big difference in taking away some of that busy work. Because I'm sure, there's plenty of accountants that be like, oh, I can do that myself manually. Great, but if we have a tool that will quickly do it for you and accurately on a monthly basis, because I wake up tired today, so I try to do the export, I do it myself, it's a mess. Oh, I got to do it again because I messed it up, it doesn't reconcile. The tool doesn't get tired, it just sort of works for you.
For sure. And like anything, there's a little bit of setup time, but like really going back to that well every month and saying, okay, I've got my standard process, let me pull down the raw information, I'll double check it, let me look at it and sort of get it up into that system. We're finding on average, we're saving about 20 hours per month per user. So you put that over a team of 7, 8, you've just added another headcount every month just from that kind of productivity.
Another good reason to look at automation, in that example right there, we all were concerned about hiring and there's not enough in the pipeline. Well, that's how you effectively replace people that you can't find, right? You find tools that can help you make up for those hours that you can't make up with people.
Yeah. And we're finding it's very seldomly, like I don't think I have one anecdote of an employee, like a customer of Amalgam, like reducing headcount. It's all been really expansionary because everyone's just so busy. We don't have enough headcount. That's a thing. It's not like we need to reduce headcount. We need more headcount. And this is something that basically enables you to do that and increase your top line through kind of more available hours, if you will.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it, sort of making up that time, allowing you to do a little bit more, do more in less time because you've got a tool that sort of supports you. And I think that's the core crux, automation, AI that's coming in right now. And, what I see though is we're still pretty much an environment where there's a lot of pushback on tools that automate. There's still a lot of accountants that are scared of automation. They're scared of improving their workflows with using a tool. How do you sort of talk to those accountants? How do you convince them like automation is the way forward?
Yeah, I think this is where that relationship approach, I think, comes in handy. Like, I don't ever start with the sale. I start by asking someone how they're doing. What are they doing? And then telling them about me. And obviously I'm in a unique position where I can kind of say, hey, I used to do the work that you do, And so I think that's number one. I think the other thing is just like psychologically think about this. Like, we as accounting type people like our tasks, we like our checklists, like we like those things. And so part of my challenge is I'm actually reducing those. That's the way we feel productive, and I'm making you do fewer of them. So kind of navigating that a little bit, I think is interesting. And I think also how we work is we just charge per user per month, and it also comes with an unlimited amount of my time. So as you have questions about the product, but more frequently, just like help building in a template or Excel. What's great about Amalgam is the product rarely breaks and it's intuitive. Excel is the interface, right? So where I'm spending my time is like having thoughtful Excel formulas that do a little bit more than someone could have done maybe with their existing skills. And I think those types of things are a way to kind of beat that kind of process focus as you're talking about, or automation kind of aversion. And I think it all comes down to just like making relationships and having people trust you. That's how an early stage product with low awareness in the market is really going to outperform.
Of all fails, Joe used Amalgam to create a company that grew 76% a year.
Yeah, there you go.
It'll put more money in your pocket.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Worst case scenario, it's just going to make you a little bit richer.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Thanks for the commercial. You're doing all the work here for me.
But, automation is there to make your life easier. It's take away those Monday works. It gives you the opportunity to be able to do the things you like more. It seems like the natural progression and we should all buy into it. And, I'm trying my best to do it as well. I also like some of the busy work, because again, piece of paper list over here. Oh, there's a busy task. Tick. Lovely. It makes me feel good. Like I actually achieved something today, rather than, oh gosh, I worked for 10 hours, but I cannot tell you what I did.
Right. That's like kind of a mental challenge. Like, okay, I'm going to make you do a few of those things that make you feel productive. Right. So it's a challenge. And yeah, I love the work too. I still love the work. My favorite thing is doing those rebuilds that I'm talking about. Like, to me, that's a puzzle. I've got to get all this data into another form. And how do I do it the right way? So I'm right there with you.
What is that ideal client for Amalgam? What does it look like? What sort of accountant are you chasing?
Yeah, generally the most impactful are like kind of outsourced accounting teams or CAS practices within larger firms. And they can be a 3-person team. It can be a 350-person team. Like I mentioned, our largest customers are over 300 users, so it works at scale. We have some of our customers, we have 100% penetration where like the CEO is using it to send his invoices, which I'm always flattered about. So it's those types of folks. Also, fund admins, tax teams are good too, and just generally ones that have multiple clients that you're using a lot of disparate data systems and have processes. It still works for kind of controller teams and in-house accounting teams, but I'm not necessarily spending as much time as there as a 50-person company versus 2 licenses, which you get. But we'll never turn those introductions down for sure.
Great. So the short answer, it can help all accountants, bigger teams, with diverse client bases. And when I start thinking about it, this is a great place where like we have in sort of wine industry, where we can't have that preferred tech group because everybody's doing their own thing. There's a bunch of different options, especially for the sales data on the DTC side. So we have to be creative in the way we come up with options. And if you're working with a lot of e-commerce clients, you probably see the same issues running into the place all the time. Well, that's a great place to start and get a tool like Amalgam or others that allow for automation to be able to take those really difficult, painful tasks that are so important because everybody cares about the sales number, and take that work and simplify it for yourself.
Yep. Yeah. No, that's exactly it. And I always thought similarly, like I never wanted to be in a position to tell a client what they should be on. If they like a system they're using, great. Like it's our job to support you around that. And so I'm right there with you in terms of like diversity system. I know can create friction or be more difficult, but like if that's what's right for the client, that's what we should be doing.
Yep. I like tell any client that's coming in, if it's not broken, we're not going to fix it. So we'll just figure out a way to work with it.
Yeah. I love that.
Joe, what's your goals for the future? Sort of what's planned? You're busy with Amalgam. Like where do you see things heading in the short term?
Yeah, no, I'm having a lot of fun with Amalgam. I think kind of what I talked about before about like the building versus operating, like very much in build mode here, like continuing to build it out, building awareness, building the product, and the customer base too. Like really good foundations, a couple top 25 CPA firms are customers and things like that, but wanting to continue to build it. And then I think kind of longer term for me, I just love the kind of entrepreneurial trajectory and love kind of thinking about businesses, seeing if there's an opportunity, and then kind of proving that hypothesis. Like that's where I get the most fun, is proving the hypothesis of will this work? And so, I think kind of the longer term, whether continuing with Amalgam or other projects that I have or will have, is really about like kind of that kind of entrepreneurial trajectory. And not that I'm necessarily the person to run it on the day-to-day, but to be involved and be building is something I get a lot of value out of.
Great. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Best piece of advice. I think you shouldn't be comfortable, I think was a real good one for me. My first manager at Goldman, we had caught up for a lunch and I sort of explained how things were going well in my new role and I was getting comfortable, and he like rebutted me. He's like, you don't get comfortable. Like, and he said something very, very flattering that I don't know if I fully believe, but he said to me, you're too smart and talented to work on someone else's dream. And it's like, that really stuck with me, is that like being comfortable is not something that's going to help me grow. And that why would I work on stuff for other people if other people are perceiving me as being this talented? So that was something that gave me maybe the advice there was just, it gave me a little bit of an ego boost to go and try things and perhaps fail sometimes. And so that was one that's stuck with me over the years.
No, that is good advice. And whenever you're feeling comfortable, there's probably something wrong.
You're growing. Run towards the pain, is a good one too. Like when you feel uncomfortable, let the discomfort guide you. I used to tell my team, if you're uncomfortable, that either means you're growing and keep pushing on that, or it means something's wrong and you need to spend time there and not procrastinate.
Yeah. Normally when we're comfortable, we take our eye off the ball, and
it's the time you need to focus.
That's what exactly. A lot of people entering the accounting world, or at least we hope they are. You don't come from the traditional path of study accounting, become an accountant. but we definitely have those people coming through. What advice would you give them as they enter into the accounting world?
No one cares about your feelings, and you shouldn't either, I think would be mine. And I know that sounds very harsh, and I'm not trying to be insensitive, but it's a matter of like, usually in the working world, most people care about like what product you're delivering and how you're delivering. And that could be a physical product, like a CPG space. It could be an amalgam product. It could be a service, or just like how are you presenting? And I think, I've met some people who kind of hem and haw over like, oh, I'm not sure if I'm good enough for this, or I'm not sure if that's going to offend someone else, or things to that nature. And really, like, offending someone else it's like kind of their choice, if you will, or, not really understanding that that's holding you back, I think is really important. So I know it sounds a little harsh, but don't get too caught up in your feelings, because no one else is really caught up in your feelings. They're focused on how you can help and deliver for them, and like go and kind of go forth, if you will.
No, it is true. I mean, we all try to create caring environments where people can thrive, but at the end of the day, it's business. Especially when you get out in the big real world, people care about output. They care about results, and they can think you're the greatest person, but if you don't have results, like they're gonna just sort of move on.
Yeah.
Like it's unfortunate fact of life, and that sort of really does dovetail pretty much into that comfort zone. If you're constantly comfortable, you're probably not delivering. There's something missing. Two very interesting pieces of advice that might get a few feathers ruffled, especially in the year 2025. So maybe those would have ruffled more feathers in the year 2024 as we sort of evolve back a little bit. But both good pieces of advice, and I think it's pretty smart. I mean, we got to understand at the end of the day, everybody's out there trying to get their job done. This is their 8 to 5. They really want to get home and be able to do the things they love, right? And so you can be a great person, but if you're not achieving, you're just getting in the way of them getting to what they want to do in life. And they're not going to care at the end of the day. So work hard, build those relationships, find ways to add value, don't get too comfortable, and generally it'll follow with some success.
Absolutely.
Joe, we like to end Pro Conversations just with a little bit of insight into who you are in your personal life. So is there anything from your, outside of the work world that you'd like to share for us to get a better sense of who Joe the person is?
Yeah. I'm easily peer pressured. That's like, that'll like, me trying to talk about all this business and things like that. But I am easily peer pressured. I don't think I've ever said no to the phrase, do you want one more beer? So, that kind of thing. But I find myself being relatively social. So I like to, I just like to talk about things and meet new people and those types of things. And, sometimes that comes with being peer pressured too easily. But yeah, I love talking with stuff you can sell. I'm not even stopping talking right now. So that would be it. I love to get new ideas and get pushed back on.
Just underlines how Joe is not the typical accountant. Definitely not, because as peer pressure and accountants, that doesn't really work that well, except when it comes for shiny technology. I think all accountants can be peer pressured into shiny technology. If one person with a decent following on social media says use this tech, everybody's in.
Yeah. And that's a trust thing, right? They trust that source of information. I think there's a lot of noise in the accounting tech space, and it's hard to differentiate yourself. And building trust is I think the number one way to do that.
Yeah. Great advice, and a really good thread that's running throughout this conversation today. Build trust, build relationships.
Yeah.
Joe, I really appreciate your time on Pro Conversations. We like to end every episode with some rapid fire. So 5 questions, really easy ones.
Okay.
Just, give me your answer, and it's always a good way to get some insight into everybody. Question 1, what is your dream vacation?
Dream vacation? It changes. Right now I'm dying to go to Patagonia. I want to hike the Andes. I hiked the northern Andes this past year, and I want to get to the southern Andes.
Do you prefer audiobooks or paper books?
Paper. Is it rapid fire, or am I giving you the why?
You can answer however you like.
Yeah, I like the paper because it forces me to be off a screen. It forces me to be in a different mental state. And I think like that's the biggest value for me when reading.
I sort of see both in values, because I do like to get out for a hike, and if I can listen to a book for 2 hours while I'm out there, I think I can get a lot done without sort of killing myself when I'm coming down the side of the mountain. Question 3, if you only had 20 minutes to exercise, what would that exercise be?
Probably a form of weightlifting. I think for me, like weightlifting is something that allows me to kind of expend some of that other pent up energy from the days. And so, there's probably a short weightlifting. That's probably the biggest impact for me.
What's your favorite piece of technology that makes your life easier?
Oh, my favorite piece of technology? I don't drive too often because I live in New York City, and this is going to sound dumb because it's so normal for everyone. But I think just having like the phone on the screen in the car, it sounds so dumb, but I just love that. I love having that available. And I'm not like texting or things like that, but but just like having that integrated in such a way that's made it so seamless, I think in the last like 5-10 years is like, that's an impactful one.
No, I agree. I get a ton done when texts and stuff, and I can just, it'll talk to me and I can talk back to it. Yeah. Last question. What would your death row meal be? What would that final meal be?
So this is going to sound really like arrogant, but I love making Italian food. I'm Italian, you can tell by my name. And I basically make a version of my grandmother's, like what we call Sunday gravy. And like, honestly, if I was allowed to make my own death row meal, I would make that because it's just like, that's home for me and that's what I would want. And so it's not like getting a steak or something like that. It's like, I want my, grandmother's Sunday gravy and meatballs and spaghetti.
Perfect. Joe, appreciate the time. Thank you for being part of Project Conversations.
No, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And with that, we ended another Project Conversations. Thank you for joining us in this journey of learning and inspiration. Today, we've gained insight from our guests and taken another step towards understanding the diverse tapestry of leadership in business and accounting. Remember, each conversation is a step towards the positive transformation of business leaders. We hope our discussion has given you valuable takeaways to apply in your own career and life. Don't forget to subscribe to Project Conversations on YouTube and Spotify so you never miss an episode. We'd also love to hear your thoughts and experiences, so connect with me on social media channels. I'm most active on LinkedIn and would love you to join the conversation. Join us next time for more engaging stories, advice, and conversations that matter. Until then, keep striving for excellence, embracing growth. Thank you for listening, be kind, and goodbye from Project Conversations.